The story of human motivation doesn't begin with action. It begins in the invisible space between a desire and the chemicals that shape it. Imagine your brain as a vast landscape of signals, impulses, and ancient mechanisms designed long before modern life existed. In that landscape, one molecule stands out as the quiet architect of your wants, your habits, your ambitions, and even the reasons you get out of bed on days when everything feels heavy. That molecule is dopamine. Most people think dopamine is the chemical of pleasure, but that's not quite true. It's not the moment you feel good, it's the force that pushes you toward the possibility of feeling good. It is anticipation more than reward, a whisper more than a shout, a spark rather than a flame. And every time you chase a goal, no matter how big or small, your brain is playing out the same ancient dance of desire, reward, and reinforcement. To understand motivation, we need to start with the simple truth that your brain is not designed for happiness. It's designed for survival. Motivation didn't evolve to make you successful. It evolved to keep you alive long enough to pass on your genes. Every craving, every burst of inspiration, every moment of restlessness that pushes you to seek something comes from a system built for finding food, safety, shelter, and connection. The same system that once pushed your ancestors to search for berries now pushes you to check your phone, chase achievements, scroll endlessly, or obsess over goals. Dopamine didn't change. The world did. Deep inside your brain, a signal begins before you even realize it. It's the hint of excitement you feel when an idea appears in your mind. The flicker of energy when you think, maybe I should try this. That's dopamine, moving from one neuron to another like a message carried through a crowded room. If the signal is strong enough, you begin imagining the reward. You visualize success. You start to anticipate how it might feel. And that anticipation before anything real happens is where motivation is born. The brain loves prediction more than achievement. It chases what might be, not what already is. But there is something strange about dopamine that most people don't know. The brain releases more dopamine when you are pursuing a goal than when you actually reach it. This is why accomplishing something often feels less satisfying than you expected. Why you can dream for months about achieving something, but once it happens, the high fades quickly and you're already thinking about the next goal. The brain is wired to keep you moving, not to let you stop. Motivation, in its purest form, isn't about satisfaction, it's about pursuit. Inside the brain's reward system, there is a delicate balance. When dopamine rises, you feel driven, focused, energized. When it falls, you feel bored, tired, or unmotivated. But dopamine doesn't stay constant. It works in peaks and valleys. Every spike is followed by a dip. Every moment of excitement is followed by a moment of emptiness. This dip is not a flaw, it's part of the system. Without the dip, the spike wouldn't feel meaningful. This is why people who chase constant stimulation, social media, sugar, video games, or even the rush of productivity often end up feeling burned out or numb. When dopamine is overstimulated, its baseline drops and normal activities stop feeling interesting. You're not broken. Your brain has simply adapted. One of the most misunderstood aspects of motivation is the idea that you must feel inspired before you take action. But the truth is the opposite. Action creates dopamine. Dopamine creates motivation, and momentum keeps the cycle alive. Your brain rewards progress, even small progress, because progress signals survival. When you take the first step towards something, even if it es tan ida, brain gives you a small dose of dopamine to encourage you to keep going. This is why the hardest part of any task is starting. Once the cycle begins, the brain amplifies it. Motion activates motivation. And yet, the mind has a dark side to this system. The same mechanism that fuels ambition can trap you in procrastination. When your brain imagines a task as overwhelming, the anticipation becomes negative. The mind predicts discomfort instead of reward. The dopamine signal weakens before you even begin. You feel resistance, frustration, avoidance. The task hasn't changed, but the brain's prediction has to overcome this. The key is not to feel ready, but to create small wins that reignite dopamine. Breaking a task into micro-actions tricks the brain into releasing small bursts of motivation with each step, shifting the cycle back in your favor. As you move through life, your dopamine system is constantly shaped by your experiences. Every victory, every failure, every pattern of behavior rewires the brain's reward pathways. Habits are formed when the brain connects an action with a dopamine spike. If something feels rewarding, your mind marks it as important. If something drains you, it marks it as something to avoid. This is why some people love pressure and deadlines, while others freeze under them. Why some people thrive in chaos, while others need structure. Your brain is always learning what brings reward and what brings stress. It adjusts your motivation accordingly. But motivation isn't only about chemistry, it's deeply connected to your identity. When your brain believes that a goal aligns with who you are, the dopamine response is stronger. When a goal feels forced or disconnected from your sense of self, the drive weakens. This is why people often struggle with goals that they think they should pursue, but don't truly care about. The brain doesn't release dopamine for should. It releases dopamine for meaning, for curiosity, for excitement, for possibility. True motivation is born from alignment, not pressure. Even your environment shapes your drive more than you realize. The people you surround yourself with influence your dopamine cycles. When you see someone achieving something, your brain activates mirror neuron cells that fire as if you were performing the action yourself. This creates a subtle rise in dopamine that can inspire you or discourage you depending on whether the comparison feels attainable or impossible. Motivation is not just internal, it's contagious. As you move throughout your day, your dopamine levels subtly rise and fall based on your routines, your thoughts, your habits, and even the things you unconsciously pay attention to. Some days you wake up with a spark. Some days you wake up empty. But you're not at the mercy of these fluctuations. You can learn to work with your dopamine system to create motivation rather than wait for it. You can train your brain to anticipate reward from effort instead of ease, from progress instead of perfection. And this leads us to the deeper question: how does the brain truly create lasting motivation? Not bursts of excitement that fade quickly, but the kind of sustained drive that carries you through challenges, setbacks, and long-term goals. The truth is that lasting motivation isn't an accident. It is a system you can shape, a pattern your brain can learn, and a cycle you can consciously influence. To understand this, imagine that every long-term goal you pursue places your brain inside a loop. Anticipation, action, reward, reflection, and adjustment. This loop runs over and over, sometimes without your awareness, guiding everything you do. When the loop is healthy, you feel driven, stable, persistent. When it's unbalanced, you drift into procrastination, burnout, or cycles of chasing quick rewards that leave you emptier than before. One of the most important things to understand is that your brain rewards effort more strongly when you acknowledge that effort, when you notice the work you're putting in, when you mentally mark progress, when you recognize that you are moving forward, even if slowly. You reinforce the dopamine pathways that lead to sustained motivation. But when you ignore your progress, when you focus only on what's missing, when you chase perfection instead of improvement, the brain reduces the dopamine it releases. The mind becomes trapped in a quiet sense of inadequacy, even when you are succeeding. This is why celebrating small wins is not simply a feel-good strategy. It is a biochemical necessity for long-term drive. Your brain also responds strongly to meaning. When a goal feels connected to your identity or to something you care about deeply, the dopamine response becomes more stable. For example, working out because you should creates a weak and inconsistent cycle. But working out because you want to be stronger or healthier or more confident, or because you want to live long enough to see your children grow up, this gives your brain a story to attach dopamine to, meaning creates resilience. It keeps you moving even when the excitement fades. But meaning alone is not enough. The brain requires clarity. A vague goal creates vague motivation. A clear goal creates clear motivation. The brain needs to visualize the steps, understand the path, and feel the possibility of progress. When you don't know what to do next, the dopamine cycle stalls. This is why people often feel motivated in theory, but paralyzed in practice. The mind needs direction. When you break a big goal into smaller steps, you give the brain a series of achievable dopamine triggers. Each step completed sparks the next. This is how long-term motivation is built, one achievable step at a time. Another powerful factor in motivation is novelty. Your brain is wired to pay attention to new things. Novelty increases dopamine. Routine maintains it. Repetition strengthens it. But monotony kills it. This is why even passionate goals can become exhausting if you never refresh them. The brain needs variety within structure. Trying a new technique, changing your environment, rewarding yourself differently, learning something new about your goal. These shifts reignite the dopamine cycle and make you feel alive within your progress again. Your environment plays an even bigger role than you think. The space you work in, the sounds around you, the people you talk to, the digital noise you consume, all of these influence your baseline dopamine levels. A chaotic environment drains your mental energy. A cluttered room signals unfinished tasks. Constant notifications hijack your reward system and fragment your focus. To build motivation, you must protect your mental space. This doesn't mean you need a perfect environment, only an intentional one. A small ritual before you begin work, a clean desk, or even a dedicated playlist can signal the brain to enter a state of effort and anticipation. There is also a deeper truth. Discipline is not the opposite of motivation. Discipline is the bridge that carries you through low dopamine states without breaking the cycle. Everyone has days when the mind is quiet, heavy, or unclear. On those days, discipline activates your brain's ability to generate dopamine through action rather than inspiration. This is why disciplined people seem motivated. It's not that they feel more dopamine, but that they keep moving long enough for dopamine to return. They trust the cycle. They work with the dips instead of fighting them. The brain also requires intentional pauses. Rest is not the absence of effort. It is part of the neurological cycle of motivation. When you rest, baseline dopamine slowly rises again. When you overwork, dopamine collapses. The brain becomes numb, tired, and resistant to effort. True rest, not mindless scrolling, but real recovery, allows your motivation to regain strength. Sleep, quiet time, nature, stillness, reflection, Mindful breathing, all of these return the brain to equilibrium, preparing you for the next cycle of pursuit. But the most powerful part of the dopamine system is this. Your brain believes the story you repeatedly tell yourself. If you tell yourself that you are lazy, unmotivated, or incapable, the brain lowers the dopamine associated with effort. It becomes harder to start, harder to continue, harder to believe that your actions matter. But when you see yourself as someone who tries, who grows, who improves, who takes small steps, even in difficult moments, your brain begins to release dopamine automatically in response to effort. You become motivated not because everything is easy, but because your mind recognizes itself as someone who keeps going. This is the foundation of lasting motivation. Your brain learns that effort leads to reward, that progress creates meaning, that trying is valuable, that persistence is worthwhile. Over time, the cycle strengthens. You begin to feel drawn to challenges. You begin to trust yourself. You begin to feel steady, quiet drive that doesn't depend on mood or inspiration, but on identity and intention. The dopamine cycle is not something outside of your control. It is something you tune, shape, and influence every day through small choices, through small actions, through the stories you tell yourself. The brain is not fixed, it is responsive. And when you work with its natural rhythms instead of against them, motivation becomes less of a mystery and more of a habit, a skill, a state you can return to again and again. You are not meant to feel inspired all the time. No one is. But you are designed to move, to grow, to adapt, to pursue what matters. The spark of motivation is not something you wait for, it's something you create. And every step you take strengthens the pathway toward the person you are becoming. If you want to understand your mind, unlock your potential, and discover the psychology behind why we do what we do, make sure to subscribe to MindDecode HQ. Turn on notifications and join us on this journey into the human brain. Your transformation starts now.